An experimental therapy that was given to a couple of cancer patients back in 2012 has turned out to be successful. 10 years later, the patients who were given this therapy are still in remission, and the genetically edited immune cells that were given as a part of the therapy were still found in these patients' blood. The treatment is known as the CAR T cell therapy, and it's a form of immunotherapy where the body's own immune system is trained to fight against cancer. In this video, we'll see what the CAR T cell therapy is and what this major breakthrough in cancer treatment implies for the disease management. I'm Sandhya Ramesh, and this is Pure Science. CAR T cell therapy makes use of our body's T cells. T cells are a type of lymphocyte or a kind of white blood cell. They are a part of the adaptive immune response and originate in our bone marrows. T cells can differentiate as they grow into different types of mature T cells. The two main kinds are killer T cells and helper T cells. Killer T cells or CD8 plus cells are cytotoxic, which means they detect infected human cells and kill those cells. This prevents the disease from multiplying and spreading in our body. Helper T cells or CD4 plus cells are the ones that activate cytotoxic T cells and also help B cells in producing antibodies. On the surface of T cells are proteins called T cell receptors. How T cells function is like this. T cells are constantly patrolling our bloodstream, and all of our cells have antigens or bits of surface proteins. T cells inspect all these cells by latching onto their proteins with their claw-like receptors. When these T cells encounter an abnormal receptor, there is a signal that's sent, and the T cell gets activated and destroys this infected or diseased cell. Cancer is intelligent enough to evade this immune response by either appearing like healthy cells or by growing so many surface antigens that T cells get confused and overworked and don't mount a good immune response against the cancer. What the CAR T cell therapy does is use the body's own T cells to fight off cancer. A patient's T cells are collected and then they are genetically modified to produce something called chimeric antigen receptors or CARs on their surface. These new cells are called CAR-T cells. Chimeric means a mixture of two, typically, and these cells are modified to perform both antigen binding and T cell activating functions into the same receptor. So they do both the helper T cell function and the cytotoxic T cell function. They are grown in a lab and millions of them are transfused back into a patient. The new cells then latch on to very specific antigens that their new receptors recognize and destroy them. Trials have been going on for a while, and now there are a total of 5 CAR T cell therapies that are approved since 2017. CAR T cells can be both cytotoxic and helper T cells. Typically, it's a 50-50 mixture of CD8 and CD4 cells. In this study, however, CD4 cells were used and modified. The study describes 2 patients with chronic or long-term lymphatic leukemia, and it was a phase 1 trial that began in 2010. When these patients were given the infusion, both of them went into remission within 6 months from the beginning of the treatment. The cancer disappeared from their bodies. These 2 patients were continuously followed up with for 10 years, and the researchers saw that the cancer did not reappear in their bodies. What's more, the researchers found that the CAR T cells remained detectable in the bloodstream for over 10 years. The cells continued to evolve and produced a more highly activated population of cells dominating the immune response in both patients. These cells still had their ability to kill tumors and thus preventing the spread of cancer cells. The improved CD4 cells or the helper cells did not first dominate the immune response. As expected, when the treatment began, the CD8 cells or the cytotoxic T cells started to kill off a majority of cancer cells. But About 9 months to a year into the treatment, the CD4 cells started to dominate the immune response and were also cytotoxic, performing the function of CD8 cells as well. Thus, they managed to keep leukemia at bay in these two patients. There was one other patient in the trial who did not respond to immune therapy. These two went into remission. Of these two, one of them actually had the cancer that affected B cells. In his treatment, the T cells were modified to kill B cells, so this left the patient with absolutely no B cells in his bodies and thus also no antibodies. So this patient requires regular infusions of antibodies, but there is no longer any cancer in his body. The other patient who had gone into remission died of COVID last year, but even at the time of his death, there was no leukemia or any kind of cancer in his body. So that's one of the biggest mysteries here. Why were there so many CD4 cells in the body? Is it because they just persist for a long time or forever? Or is it because the leukemia is not fully gone, so the cells are constantly working to kill off whatever tumor is trying to grow? Then again, there were absolutely no cancer cells at all that were found in both the patients' bodies. Oncologists and immunologists are still trying to understand what is happening here. There are also a few downsides to CAR T cell therapy. Firstly, not everyone responds to immunotherapy. It's not successful everyone, like the third patient in the phase 1 trial. Secondly, there could also be some very serious and dangerous side effects because CAR T cell therapy tampers with the immune system. Some of these side effects include high fever, shortness of breath, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, seizures, allergic reaction, nutrient fluctuations in the blood, and a heavily compromised immune system. But despite all of that, these initial results are still a big win for humanity's millennia-long fight against cancer. These are preliminary results, but something keeping cancer at bay for 10 continuous years is a big deal. As we go forward, CAR T cell therapies are likely to provide more promising results and help us treat cancer better. As the authors say, cure is not a word that you can really throw around when it comes to cancer, but this therapy has shown that it can potentially cure cancer.